Most people think success is loud. That power comes from being the loudest voice in the room. But what if that's the very reason they fail? In a world that rewards visibility, we've mistaken noise for influence and volume for intelligence. We celebrate those who speak first, speak fast, and speak most. Yet history and psychology tell a different story. The most dangerous, most strategic, and most powerful people, they don't shout. They listen. They don't reveal. They calculate. They don't explain. They act. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this more than anyone. Born into a time of brutal power struggles, where survival meant outwitting rather than outshouting your rivals, he observed one truth. Silence is a weapon, and those who master it bend reality in their favor. Think about it. When someone talks too much, what do they really show you? They expose their fears, their ambitions, their insecurities. They reveal their strategies before they even move. In trying to appear strong, they accidentally hand you the blueprint to destroy them. But the silent one? They become a mystery. And in psychology, the human brain hates mysteries. It will create stories, motives, and interpretations just to fill the void. That's where real power lies. Not in what you say, but in what you leave unsaid. This is not about being passive. It's about learning to be deliberate. Machiavelli never advocated for silence as weakness. He advocated for silence as control. Control over your emotions. Control over your image. And most importantly, control over information. Because here's what the world won't tell you. People who speak less are not weaker. They are simply harder to predict, and therefore harder to manipulate. Let's take a real-world example. In job interviews, studies show that those who pause before answering appear more confident and thoughtful. Why? Because silence creates tension, and tension creates curiosity. The listener leans in. They anticipate something meaningful. Now apply that to power. The leader who doesn't react immediately during crisis? Terrifying, because no one knows what they're thinking. And the unknown always feels more dangerous than the known. So if you've ever felt like you're too quiet, if you've been told to speak up more in rooms where noise drowns out reason, pause, because that quiet part of you might just be your greatest strength. Most people think influence comes from what you say, but Machiavelli would argue otherwise. Real power lies in what you don't say, in the silence between words, in the pauses before a decision, in the calm restraint when others expect an explosion. That's where control truly lives. This wasn't just a philosophy. It was a tactical weapon. He warned that appearing too perfect triggers resentment. If you never show weakness, people don't admire you. They look for ways to tear you down. That's why the most successful leaders appear flawed strategically. They drip just enough humanity to seem relatable, while never giving away their position of strength. Sound familiar? Modern psychology calls this the pratfall effect, where a person who is generally competent becomes more likable when they make a small mistake. Why? Because perfection threatens people. But controlled imperfection? That feels safe. And that's the game Machiavelli knew best, controlling how others see you, without ever showing them your full hand. Be bold, but never reckless. Show strength, but not cruelty. Appear generous, but don't be naive. Use silence not as absence, but as signal. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you used silence to guide perception, not to avoid conflict? Too often we think silence means surrender. But in power dynamics, silence is often the loudest statement in the room. Think of the people who intimidate you, the ones whose silence makes you second-guess your own thoughts. That discomfort? It comes from not knowing what they're thinking. That ambiguity? It creates fear, and fear is power. Machiavelli understood that the less you reveal, the more others project onto you. If you leave a blank canvas, people will paint it with their own fears, desires, and assumptions. And 9 times out of 10, that version of you is far more powerful than the truth. Because the truth can be negotiated. But mystery? That's immune to negotiation. Here's a brutal irony. People trust what they cannot fully understand. The calm CEO who rarely speaks, but moves decisively. The quiet friend who listens more than they speak. The colleague who never joins gossip, but always seems to know everything. Their silence speaks volumes, not of emptiness, but of intelligence, intention, and restraint. Power, then, is not loud. It's surgical. And silence, it's not the absence of noise. It's the presence of precision. So, next time you're in a room full of people trying to prove something, don't hold your ground. Say less. Watch more. You're not withholding. You're commanding. People are not driven by facts. They're driven by fear, pride, envy, and the desperate need to belong. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology gave it names. He didn't need a lab to tell him what thousands of rulers learned the hard way. If you want to control the outcome, control the emotions. And to control emotions, you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to know where the cracks are. Let's start with fear. Fear doesn't just paralyze. It redirects. It makes people abandon logic in favor of safety, even if that safety is fake. That's why leaders who seem calm in chaos gain followers without trying. Their silence becomes a shelter, something people instinctively move toward, like animals sensing a fire and running toward stillness. Then there's pride, the easiest lever to pull. If you want someone to follow you, don't argue with them. Don't confront their beliefs directly. Make them feel clever for agreeing with you. Let them think it was their idea all along. This is not manipulation. This is alignment, covert emotional alignment. People will go to war for what they believe they chose, not what they were told. And envy? It's a currency. Machiavelli warned. If you shine too brightly, you become a threat. But if you dim your light just enough, you become inspiration. Envy is unavoidable, but it's manageable if you know how to stay visible without being vulnerable. That's why the wise appear lucky, not strategic. Fortunate, not calculating. No one envies a genius. They resent them. But everyone admires someone just like them, who happened to rise. Now let's talk about the need to belong. Humans are wired to seek connection. But here's the trick. The loner with direction, with silence, with purpose, becomes magnetic. People project meaning onto quiet confidence. They assume you know something they don't. They assume you've been somewhere they haven't. In that gap, you become a symbol, not a person. And symbols are powerful. So, how do you use all this without becoming a villain? By staying quiet enough to observe, but not so detached that you lose empathy. Silence, when used wisely, is not just about holding power. It's about watching how others use theirs. Every word they speak, every glance, every hesitation, it's data. And when you speak last, you speak with precision. You don't fight the wave, you ride it. Remember, you don't need to be the loudest in the room to own the room. You only need to understand the storm inside others better than they understand it themselves. And that understanding comes not from shouting your opinion, but from listening to their silence. Let's say you've mastered the art of saying less. You don't reveal your plans. You don't argue in public. You don't defend your value. You demonstrate it by being unshakable. But here's the twist. Silence alone isn't power. Silence without structure is confusion. Silence without vision is emptiness. Machiavelli never said be silent. He said be strategic. The two are not the same. So how do you turn this silence into a crown? You build a kingdom not of noise, but of outcomes. People don't follow loud people. They follow consistent ones. In a world screaming for attention, the one who acts with calm intention becomes a signal in the noise. They become what others orbit around, not because they beg for it, but because they no longer need to. Here's what most get wrong. They think dominance means aggression. But true dominance feels like inevitability. It doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply arrives, and when it does, everyone knows it. You don't win by controlling others. You win by becoming the one others can't ignore. And to do that, you must master the silence between their actions. The space where doubt lives. The hesitation before they speak. The pause between their questions. That's where real leverage hides. Not in their words, but in what their words avoid. In that silence, you plant suggestion, not command. You suggest possibility, and they think it's their own. You offer clarity, and they assume they discovered it. You create movement without moving. That is the essence of strategic silence. It's not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's the most precise, most powerful form of communication. Because when people hear nothing, they fill the gap with meaning. And if you've done your work, they'll fill that gap with exactly what you intended. So here's the real challenge. Can you stay calm while the world reacts? Can you speak last and still be remembered first? Can you build a presence so grounded that even your silence feels louder than noise? If the answer is yes, then you've understood what Machiavelli saw centuries ago, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.